At age 6, I had a trauma that I had completely suppressed until just a few years ago. And it changed everything in my life from that moment forward. And that was when my body had had enough. And it said, we're done. I'm going to protect you from the world by keeping you away from the world. So I suddenly became allergic to everything. And the more stress and the more things that happened in my life, the more my body screamed at me. There wasn't anything that was going to heal it except for healing the reason that it was happening in the first place. Within about 2 hours of being in the water, my husband's rushing me off to the hospital. My body never recovered from that. I felt my body shutting down. Excuse me, but she just grabbed me and she said, "You are dying." The doctor said I have the liver of an end-stage alcoholic. And I said, "I don't drink." And he looked at my husband. He said, she needs to get real or she's going to die. And my husband's like, she doesn't drink. She's allergic to alcohol. But my liver was shutting down. My kidneys were shutting down. My body was just it was just enough. Tell me what happened to you at 14. And I had never said one word about it until that moment. All that was the turning point of, I want to live. I have a new grandbaby. I have to do things different. If she can do that to me over the phone, why can't I? There's something more that I am missing and I need to know. Ooh, that's a good question. I pause and hesitate to share this part because this is not how it has to be, but it is the way it was for me. And I was literally in bed most of those 4 days of each treatment for 4 years. From the time I started to heal, I woke up every day and said, Lord, just show me the truth of who I am.
That was profound. That was really profound, what you just said. Really, really profound.
Every trauma that happens, every stressor that happens creates an electromagnetic charge in our body. And our cells take it on a cellular level. Desensitization is literally recoding your body one step at a time for everything that's happened that's not serving your highest good, helping you to come back to your divine design is 100% effective. So once somebody clears it, that issue is no longer an issue. When we start to learn to get out of our head and in our heart, magic starts to happen in our life. I feel like God put me in this role in life and gave me this experience because what is happening on the outside of me is what's happening on the inside of everybody. Ooh, the best piece of advice I've ever received. Oh gosh, there's so many, but I would say...
Hey, this is Em Hollis, and welcome to the messy truth of transformation, where it's okay to be magical and messy. This isn't your typical personal growth podcast. Around here, we talk about the real stuff, the raw, the honest, the shadow work, the spirals, the breakthroughs, and the beautiful chaos of becoming who you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt alone on your healing and growth journey, or you wondered why it feels hard even when you're doing the work, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Let's dive into the messy truth of what it actually takes to transform your life. Today, I'm sitting down with Cindy Costley. She is the founder of The Underlying Answers and creator of the Electromagnetic Body Desensitization Technique, or EBDT. After living with a rare disorder that caused constant allergic reactions for over 34 years, Cindy discovered that her body wasn't breaking down. It was speaking to her. That realization transformed her life and inspired a revolutionary healing method that bridges Western science, Eastern practices, spirituality, and scripture. Through her work, Cindy helps coaches, healers, and faith-based leaders release hidden stress patterns and restore balance across what she calls the 6 frequencies of healing: spiritual, energetic, mental, emotional, physical, and behavioral. Let's dive into the messy truth. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Messy Truth of Transformation. I have Cindy here. Hi, Cindy.
Hello, Em. How are you? I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I am excited to dive in with you to hear about your journey and to share your messy truths, because it sounds like there's been a few. So what I always want to start with for an audience member that's tuning in that doesn't know about you, doesn't know about your work, I think it's important to start from the beginning. So what was life like for Cindy at age 5, age 10, and age 15?
Ooh, good questions. Okay. So, starting at age 5, I would say this was probably the blissful time for me. This was before trauma started. So I have a beautiful family. I just want to say that up front. I know a lot of people don't have that scenario. I was just very blessed with an amazing parents, siblings, and they worked hard. We played hard, and life was good. Life was good. And then 6 years old came, and everything switched for me. Although I didn't know it. So at age 6, I had a trauma that I had completely suppressed until just a few years ago. And it changed everything in my life from that moment forward. So it completely shifted everything, although nobody knew anything about that. And, at the time, it was so painful, and as a 6 years old, you don't know how to process something like that, so I just suppressed it. I just pushed it in and moved on like life was normal. So at 10, things were good. I'm starting to get a little hormonal, like, I'm riding horses, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to get some allergies I never had. My dogs that we had in the house, I suddenly became allergic to over the last couple years. So the allergies started peaking in around probably 8 to 9, but weren't severe enough for us to really do much about it. Age 12, they started getting pretty severe where my parents were looking at maybe some shots or something for me, but we were just still hemming and hawing about it. And then at age 14, I had a group. I don't know how frank to be here, and I don't want to trigger anybody. So it was a sexual trauma that was group related and very, very, very horrible. And I did not suppress this. I knew about it, but I never spoke a word about it to anybody because I thought I would get the person that I trusted the most. It was a group of boys, and one of them was somebody I knew and loved and trusted, and I didn't want him to go to jail. So I zipped my mouth shut and moved on. And I am a person that's always been happy and grateful for what I do have, and kind of always had that attitude of, well, other people have it worse. So I was able to just kind of press beyond it, but it was a severe, like, looking back now, I think, wow, how did I do that? And then at 15, I had another trauma. Wasn't a group, but it was a single individual. And that was when my body had had enough. And it said, we're done. I'm going to protect you from the world by keeping you away from the world. So I suddenly became allergic to everything, all animal life. So I couldn't be 5 minutes in anybody's house with any kind of an animal. Most foods, almost all plant life, and most chemicals. And we had no idea. It manifested in the form of rashes for me. And my parents, we had me at UCLA. We were trying everything that we could try to figure out what it was. But that was the turning point that changed everything for my life, although I had no understanding why, and neither did my family. And I just kind of started down this road of being this girl allergic to everything. And I lived that way for 34 years. And we can get into that when you're ready for the next question. But that was my childhood. It just started really great. But these traumas changed everything physiologically for me,
Yeah.
not mentally or emotionally.
Wow. So it was like purely physical manifestations as opposed to
100%.
wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I had,
Wow.
I used to tell when, moving forward, once I had children, I used to tell my girls, you don't want what happened to me to happen to you. And I never expressed what happened to me. I just said, I got away unscathed, but I was lucky. That's what I
Wow.
used to tell my children and
Wow.
my husband and anybody that I wanted to talk about, like, don't let bad things happen to you, right?
Yeah.
And, still never telling the story, but I even was in therapy because my mom had found out about what happened to me at 15. So she
Okay.
put me in therapy, and I was in 2 years of therapy, but never said a word about what happened to me at 14.
Wow.
And never knew and understood what happened to me at age 6.
Wow.
So, we did some good processing about the one at 15, which it's amazing to see the difference in when it came time to healing everything, how that one was so much easier to heal because I had addressed it, right?
Wow. Wow.
But yeah, it started me down a physiological path of illness, chronic
Yeah.
illness.
Yeah. So you said when you were 15, so the two instances, and be as open as you are comfortable with, because this is
Okay.
the messy truth, this is the
Yeah.
the whole reason I started this podcast is so that somebody else in your position isn't afraid to go,
Yeah.
okay, this does need to be talked about, or I do need to be okay with talking about this.
Yeah.
So the instance at 12 was something you never told anybody, and then it happened again at 14. So then at 15, you did tell your parents at 15 years old?
No, let me back up just a moment. So
Yeah.
at 14 is when the group um situation had happened. And I am very open and willing to share anything. And I'm also very cautious about triggering people
Yeah,
because it was
absolutely.
so extreme what happened to me.
Yeah.
But at 14, so at 6, it was a neighbor,
Wow.
which we found out again just a few years ago. At 14, it was a group of guys. We were out. They gave me, I never drank. They gave
Mm,
me, oh, what was it called? It's like one of the Everclear, I think it's called,
yeah.
or Ever
Oh, yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the,
Yeah.
big, like, heaviest alcohols, right? I don't drink, so I don't know, like, all the terminology of alcohol,
Yeah.
but, and I passed out, and I woke up naked in a forest,
Wow.
with 5 people on me. So,
Wow. Wow.
um, I was basically what happened so then at 15, I was raped by a gentleman, and then my mom found out about that one, and I had written a letter to a friend about it, and then her mom found that letter, and my mom put me in therapy, but I never, like, talked about what happened to me at 14, which was the biggest of the traumas. Well, at
Wow.
6 years old, of course, ended up being a big trauma, but I didn't know, so 14 was so much bigger than
Yeah.
what happened to me at 15, because I
Yeah.
owned some of what happened to me at 15, like, I was able to process that and understand, like, my role in it. I mean, I
Mhm.
didn't deserve what happened to me, but I definitely put myself in a scary position. So the way my body started manifesting it is right after, being raped at 15, I just became allergic to everything, but never
Wow.
correlated those 2. I look back now and go, how did we never look at that?" It's just you didn't talk about it back then. There wasn't conversations about how trauma impacts our bodies back then, so I
Yeah.
just never thought about it.
Wow. But that's when the allergies really.
That's when the rashes hit, and they were severe. I mean, asthma, severe rashes, anaphylaxis of the skin, they called it. So I would break out in just massive rashes, and it was just one after another, and we cut out all the foods, and we did, all the things that they tell you to do, all the steroids I started taking, and UCLA said I had a leaky gut and I needed surgery. And my mom was like, I don't really want to do surgery. So she took me down the holistic route and we started
Oh,
working with a holistic practitioner. And I would eat, my dad used to call it, like the witch's cauldron, right? Like, cause my mom would be stirring the herbs and the whole house would stink of these herbs and I'd have to drink that for days. But a year later, I went back to UCLA and then they actually said that that they must have misdiagnosed me because the leaky gut, the hole in my the small intestines was gone. So I do think that that helped,
sure.
right? It made a difference, but it didn't we never addressed the root cause for
Yeah.
all those years. So
So what was life like for the next 10, 15 plus years? Was it constantly dealing with this? Would it go away? Would it come back? How did you navigate that?
it did there were times when I can look back and go, "Oh, that was a period of time that was good," but, life happens and stress happens, so now I can look back and go, every time it came back for long periods of time was correlated with some really stressful things. At 24, my dad passed away of cancer, and then I had a baby shortly after that, and that just threw all my hormones out, and my doctor even said, "You should not live in California, it's too dry, you should go somewhere where it's humid." And so I packed up my daughter as a single mom and I packed her up and moved to Florida. And
Wow.
I ended up flaring me up more. And now I know why, because what happened to me in at 14 was in Georgia. So the weather was the same. So I was just constantly being triggered in Florida.
Wow.
So I moved back home 9 months later and just always trying new things, Western medicine, Eastern practices. I lived my life. I married my husband. He had 2 kids. I had one. They were 2, 3, and 4. So we had a blended family and I went back to college and got a degree. And so I lived my life, but it was very much in the form of a bubble. So if we ever went to somebody's house, they had to, like, my friends were saints, my family were amazing. They would vacuum everything, make sure the animals were out, make sure that my food was separate from everybody else's food. Like, I had a tribe around me that really supported me in living this way, and now I've learned how much fear they had all those years,
Mm,
of
mm,
causing those
mm,
allergic reactions, or being like, me not being able to show up or come. I mean, there were so many times where I was in the middle of something at someone's house and something would flare up and I'd have to leave, and
wow.
whenever I would go down, I'd go down for a week or 2, and then my body would bounce back and come back on, and during that time, especially raising kids, my family would be like, "Okay, Cindy's down," and my in-laws would come and take the kids to school, and meals would show up at our house, so we just learned to live within this realm of a
Mm,
chronic illness, right? And
mm,
and I I look at now and I work with my clients talking about how much do we normalize something,
mhm,
right? I just normalized that this was it was, and the older I got and the more stress and the more things that happened in my life, the more my body screamed at me, and I normalized more and more and more, so my life got smaller and smaller and smaller, where people started coming to our house instead of me going to their houses, and it was it's very fascinating to look back now over that period of time and realize how much we just all accepted it. And what else could we do? There was no answers. We were trying everything, you know.
mm,
I
mm.
was trying everything Western, Eastern that I knew to try.
Yeah, and
So
nothing would really shift it.
every a lot of things shifted it temporarily. You know, a lot of steroids, unfortunately, that I took, and they gave me the relief I needed at the time, right? So, and even holistically, if I found an herb or a process that I could do, it worked temporarily, and then everything flared back up again. And I know now it's because I was just constantly being re-triggered,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So there wasn't anything that was going to heal it except for healing the reason that it was happening in the first place. I
yeah,
just didn't know any of that. So,
yeah, yeah.
I
So
I went through life laughing, saying, "I'm the girl allergic to the world, and I won the
wow,
allergy lottery," and, labeling myself in these ways that were just,
yeah,
mind-blowing to me now looking
perpetuated it.
back.
What
Yeah.
was the official diagnosis that they gave you eventually?
They did well, okay, so eventually so it took 34 years to, be diagnosed, and eventually it became either mast cell activation syndrome or mastocytosis, and I needed a bone marrow biopsy to determine the 2. And it's so interesting because the first practitioner that told me that, I looked it up and I just started bawling. I'm like, "This
Mm,
is my life. This makes so much sense." But nobody really understood mast cell issues back when all this started with me. It's a fairly new disorder that's kind of a lot of people are understanding more and more about, and a lot of doctors are talking about. So, I really was just diagnosed as allergic. Like, nobody ever talked about it being an autoimmune issue or anything like that. So, I just accepted that because,
mm,
again, I was very positive, right? I'm like, "Well,
yeah,
this is all I have," right?
yeah,
This,
yeah.
I'm so lucky. This is all I have to deal with. And so once I was diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome or mastocytosis, I kind of became obsessive about trying to figure out which one it was. And it was a doctor that looked at me and said, "Why do you need to know? Why do you need
Mm,
to know what it is? Why don't we just heal it?" And that was kind of the beginning of my journey healing, and
mm.
starting to look at things from a different perspective.
Mm. So you talk about a moment of being on vacation with your
Yeah,
family and going into the lake and having a horrible reaction. I would love for you to share that story. And is that
yeah.
the moment that you knew like there's got to be something deeper? Like I need to do something about this. I can't keep living this way anymore.
That was the moment that led me to that place, but it took about 9 months to get there, but, going back to that moment, my family and I were big water skiers. We go to Lake Powell every few years, and we were all set to go to Lake Powell and be on this houseboat, and the houseboat that we were supposed to go on crashed, and so we all rallied up, 20 of us, and found another lake, and I'd never been on that lake, so I knew I was safe at Lake Powell, and so we go to this lake up in the Northern California, the Delta, and within about 2 hours of being in the water, my husband's rushing me off to the hospital. I had a massive anaphylactic reaction of the skin again, and my body never recovered from that. So normally, like I said, it would take a week or 2 for my body to kind of settle down and everything would be cool. I stayed on vacation, but I just pretty much stayed inside in the air conditioning the whole time, and it was just a bummer, and I I I just learned all those years that even though I couldn't do all the things everybody wanted to do, I had that attitude of that's okay, right? That's okay. I wasn't feeling my feelings. That's what it came down to. And then over that the next 9 months, I just kept having one reaction after another, after another, after another. There was no break. There was no recovery. My body just, everything from my husband. This is when my life shrank so much. Like I'd make him take his clothes off before coming in the house from work. I stopped going to the grocery store. We packed up our house, moved out of the city into the beach because the doctor said I'd probably be better off at the beach. And we took out all our carpet and we took out drapes. Like we literally just every it was everything, and
Wow.
I felt my body shutting down, and
Wow.
I told my husband one night, I just started bawling, I said, "My soul wants to dance, and it's gonna dance whether I'm here on earth or I'm in heaven, I know it." And the very next day, my sister came over to see me, and she just grabbed me, and I'm gonna cry, excuse me, but she just grabbed me and she said, "You are dying." And my husband and I had been at the doctor's the week prior, and the doctor said I had the liver of an end-stage alcoholic. And I said, "I don't drink." And he looked at my husband, he said, she needs to get real or she's gonna die." And my husband's like, "She doesn't drink, she's allergic to alcohol." But my liver was shutting down, my kidneys were shutting down, my body was just it was just enough. And she looked at me and she shook me and she said, "You're dying." And I said, "I know." And she said, "What do we do?" And I said, "I don't know." And then she got she just went kind of did what my sister's always done, which has been there for me, and she went and got me an appointment with a very well-known, functional medicine doctor in Massachusetts. And so we flew there, and it was kind of disappointing, to be honest, but it to put me in the right direction of functional medicine. And I came home and sought out another functional doctor, and he said, he did a bunch of tests, and he said that my adrenal glands were so spent that my body was producing cortisone at 0.6%, meaning I was no longer producing. So when we're in high stress, we overproduce cortisone, but I had been in that state for so long that my body my was no longer able to even produce the cortisone. So or the cortisol. So he said, you won't survive because once you stop producing cortisol, your body cannot start up again. And so you have to go on synthetics cortisol, and your body, the number one reaction is allergic reaction. You will not tolerate it. You will not survive. He said, you need to sleep every 4 hours. So for several months, I had to stay in my house. I had to stay away from all like anything that could possibly flare me up. I was housebound for 8 months. I slept every 4 hours, and I just started to heal and calm my system. That was the first thing I needed to do, was just calm everything down, and that worked. And then I felt like I needed another functional doctor that was more of a Western had the balance of both. So I sought out kind of the house doctor is what I like to look at it as, and he is someone who focuses on rare disorders, and he's the one, that said, I walked in well, first of all, it took me 6 months to see him, and I think this is an important part of the story because at the beginning of that, when I first booked him, my niece had said, "Aunt Cindy, you have to see this healer," and it took me 6 months to see her, so I had an appointment with her the night before I had an appointment with him, and I drove 6 hours to go see him, so, he was 6 months away and 6 hours away, and the night before, I was in my brother's motorhome because when I would visit my brother who lives in Northern California, I couldn't be in his house because of his animals and all the things, so I stayed in his motorhome whenever I was there, and I had an appointment with this healer, and I never worked with a healer prior to this, and first thing she says is, "Tell me what happened to you at 14."
Wow.
And I said, "What?" And so she says, "Tell me what happened to you at 14." So I told her what happened to me at 15, and she said, "Nope, tell me what happened to you at 14." And I had never said one word about it until that moment. And
Wow.
I just started bawling. She goes, "This is everything about what you're going through. And then the next day, I saw this functional Western doctor who is like an MD, practices in Western medicine. I mean, Western practitioner, but focuses on Eastern medicine, and he's a Ayurvedic
Mm.
practitioner as well.
Mm.
And he's the one that said, "Why do you?" I said, "Do I need the bone marrow biopsy? You know, I need to know." And he's like, "Why do you need to know? Why don't we just heal it?" And he's the one that said, "The moment you get home, you need to start desensitization."
Wow.
And I had never heard of it. And so that was all that was the turning point of, I wanna live, I have a new grandbaby, I have to do things different. I have to, and when I saw that healer, to go back to her the night before, this was in January, like January 6th, somewhere around there, and my husband and I had had the flu really bad that summer. I mean, that Christmas, and I was put on an antibiotic, and I had a massive reaction to the antibiotic, but I had to because I had to stay on it because I had, bronchitis. So I was just all rashy, and she did all this healing, and I wake up the next morning and it's all gone. All my rashes completely gone, and I'm like, "Whoa, okay." And you know what I said to myself? I said, "If she can do it, why can't I? If she can do that to me over the phone, why
Wow.
can't I? There's something more that I am missing and I need to know." And that was, like, such a turning point for me, and I hired a spiritual, um, like, therapist, kind of like a spiritual coach, and that's when I really went down a fully different direction of healing
And
between
you
those 2 the healer and the doctor.
I mean, I think it's incredible that you had the awareness to go. I kind of want the balance of both of those because most people, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, go only
Yeah,
going down one path or the other.
right.
So, what, like, at that point, 35 years you've been
Yeah.
struggling with this, and would you say, Cindy, that you led a stressful life? Like, what do you feel like the everyday stressors added to that,
Mm.
or maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but do you feel it was literally just holding on to the trauma of these things that happened when you were younger?
Ooh, that's a good question. When you first started asking that, my thought was, yes, I lived a stressful life, but it was because of the illness. I had a beautiful life. I have an amazing husband that supports me. Like I said, I have a tribe of family and friends that have always I've just been blessed, right? Other than those 3 traumas, I really have been blessed. And of course things happen. Like I said, I lost my dad. You know, going through being a single mom, that was not easy. But my husband stepped in, when she was 2 or 3. So just, it wasn't that bad. Was there stress? Of course, there was stress. Nobody goes through life without stress. If I didn't have, trauma after trauma, or stressful situation after stressful situation. I was, really blessed in that way. I just had these chronic, massive allergic reactions.
Wow.
And that was my life. And I remember my niece telling my sister once, she said, "I don't understand Aunt Cindy. Why doesn't she like go do something about this? Like
Mm,
she just is living this way." And that's all I kind of knew how to do.
mm,
I look back now, and we were in survival mode. My husband and I were in survival mode because even, working full time, he worked full time. We raised 3 kids. 2 of them went to a different house every other week, and that was problematic in its own ways. So, was there stress? Of course, but it was normal, kind of just busy life stress, right? And and so I just added my allergic reactions into that life. I kind of folded everything in together,
mhm, mhm.
as opposed to really pausing for a moment and saying, "What is this actually happening
Yeah,
to me?"
yeah. So walk us through the next 6 months after you meet with these people, you meet with this healer, and you said you had never really went down the more Eastern spiritual side before meeting energetic work, before meeting with that healer. So walk us through the next 6 months. What happened from that moment on?
So for the next 6 months, I'd already gone through the time period where I settled my system,
Mhm.
and for the next 6 months, my Western doctor right away said, "I just want you to start desensitization immediately." So I came back home, found a practitioner. I was doing weekly desensitization. I went through a couple practitioners before I found the one that I really felt was was working with me as opposed to I'm doing it my way. Like, I really feel we have
Mm,
to, like, we know our bodies, and I knew that it was trauma at this point, and I needed to find a practitioner that believed that. And so once I found him, we just started healing, and it was a weekly desensitization, and we just started healing all the trauma. At the same time, I was seeing a healer, a local healer, and I would go to her, and she would do healings on me. And healings are beautiful, and they're so important. They're such an important part, and she would give me answers, right? I would get answers from her, that Western medicine couldn't give me, or the Eastern, because the desensitization is more of an Eastern philosophy, right? It's more of a homeopathic type, process. And so, but I still had, Dr. Palanasamy, who was monitoring my blood work every quarter. He was seeing me all the time. So I had this team of people, and we were just kind of doing it all different ways as I just healed one aspect of my traumas after another after another. And, it was really hard. And I, 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 I pause and hesitate to share this part because this is not how it has to be, but it is the way it was for me. So I want to be very clear in that. I learned a lot, and it doesn't have to be the way it was, but for me, it was a 5-year process. So I did almost 5 years of desensitization, and for the first 4 years, I was in bed 4 days a week. So after every remedy, my body reacted, like it releases the trauma. And so my body released that trauma through these allergic reactions. So it's almost like, they say a boot camp, they build you up to build, to take you down, right? So it's the releases were kind of that way for me, where it released very physically. And then I was fine. And then I'd have a day or two of a break, and then I would go for another treatment. And I was literally in bed, most of those 4 days of each treatment for almost for 4 years. And then after that last year was a lot easier, and my body started, I could be up and about during the treatment, after the treatment or the remedies. So, yeah, it was rough.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I knew it was my only answer. I knew that, at one point my husband's like, "You're not getting better." Like, he was just watching me suffer going through these releases, right? And I'm like, "Do you want me to go? I'll go see a doctor. I'll go." This is when I was doing pretty well. And I won't say where, but I went to a well-known mast cell hospital. And basically they were like, and I had a very severe reaction that day because I was nervous about going there, and everything, all my emotions manifested as allergic reactions. So I got really anxious going there because I just knew they weren't going to have the answers for me. But mast cell was a conversation that was pretty
Mm,
big at that point with doctors. And so I told my husband, "Okay, I'll go. I'll see what they have to say." And basically they're like, "Come back every other week for the rest of your life, take a shot, and we're going to just keep you comfortable. Let's focus on quality of life." And that was their answer for me. And then my husband was like, "Okay, let's go back, keep trying, do what you're doing." So I needed
wow.
to hear that because there was part of me that was like, "Wow, this is really hard. Is there another answer?" And I just went back to the desensitization process. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you don't realize how many different things impact you,
Mm,
from
yeah.
your childhood, until you
Yeah.
start going through something like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
When you were finally able to share what happened to you at 14 with the healer, were you then able to start talking about it with your husband, with your family? Was it something at that point you were like, "Oh my gosh, I know that I need
I
to."
have to talk about it. Yeah. I started telling everybody, well, everybody that was around me. I called my mom over, I called my sister because I didn't know. Oh, no, sorry, that was the 6-year-old, so that's a whole 'nother piece because I didn't know if he had done that to anybody else in my
Mm,
family.
mm,
But the 14-year-old, I even called the closest to family member you could get, is how I would relate our relationship back then, back at that age. I even called him and just said, "We need to talk about this."
wow.
And he did admit it, and he remembered it, and it was
Wow.
a really healing conversation. So I did a lot of healing in a lot of different ways. I wanna go back and just kind of share what happened at 6 and how my body revealed that, because what happened is the first year of desensitization, we really got me doing well. So I was thriving again. I was back to work, and I had spent 10 years building a business that I walked away from because I just chose to heal. And so I was doing so well after a year, I thought, well, maybe I could go back to it. And at that point, I just had my employees still working it. I hadn't walked away completely. But I thought, I think I can jump back in and start working again. And I was traveling again. And then I went to, I had to go on vacation. I went on a business trip and then I decided to surprise my daughter. And I went to her house for Mother's Day and my grandson was about to turn 6. And I kept saying, I can't believe you're going to be 6. I can't believe you're going to be 6. Oh my gosh. And then the very next day that I got home, I had my very last menstrual cycle ever, which was weird because it had been like a year and a half of nothing. And then I broke out in the worst rash from here to my ankles, worse than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. The most painful thing, I told my husband, I literally would walk around just naked in my house, like my arms out. I'm like, this is pure rage. Like I just knew it, but I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, what is this? And my practitioner, my desensitization practitioner, was on vacation at the time. So he was gone for 2 months. And I was going to other people and nobody really understood or knew it. And finally I called and he had come back and I sat in his office and he does muscle testing. I don't know if you're familiar with muscle testing, but that's how he always figures out what we need to treat for next. And he just started crying and he goes, I can't figure it out, Cindy. It's pointing inside your body, but I'm not getting an answer. And I said, "Oh no, you cannot give up on me." Like I just felt him just like I don't have the answer. And he was crying because he's like, we've gotten you so far, right? So I called on a healer again and a psychic, and I went to her and she said, your body's pushing out something from age 6 or between 4 and 6, she said. And I said, no way. And she said, yeah. And I remembered that after we had finished healing the first 2 traumas, the second 2 traumas, Dr. Gary, who was my practitioner, said, you have one more when you were young. And I said, no, I don't. I had a great childhood. He goes, no, you have one more. And I said, no, I don't. I had a great childhood. And he dropped it because he knew I wasn't ready to hear it. So a year goes by, we're continuing desensitization, but it's not so bad. I'm traveling, I'm feeling like I'm getting my life back. And then this happens. And I remembered that. So I went to him and he said, let's test. He goes, I don't remember saying that to you, but let's test it. And then he said, yeah, absolutely. You were molested. And it was, he said age 6. And then he said it was a neighbor. And he had me name off a bunch of neighbors and he's muscle testing. So we're just trying to figure out what happened. My best friend lived next door and she had like 5 brothers. So I'm naming off everybody going, please God, don't let it be any of them. Right. And all of a sudden I think of this one individual that lived across from us. And he was just kind of this old man that his younger son lived there. And I just didn't remember him too much, but I'm like, well, there was this guy, John, that lived across from us. And he goes, that's the guy. And I was like, wow. He says, do you want a treat? I said, no, no, no. This is way bigger than just a treatment. I need to go and process this. So I go home and I'm sitting on my bed and I text my mom and I'm like, Mom, do you remember the guy that lived across from us, John? And do you remember who his name and stuff? And she gives me his name, his full name and stuff. And I look him up. And the moment I see his face, he had deceased, but I saw his obituary, his picture. My whole body starts doing this. I start like, I don't even know how to express it, except it was like spasming uncontrollably for 45 minutes on my bed. And the doctor the next day said that was my body releasing the trauma. So it was unlocking the memories of the trauma at the time. And so that next day I went and saw Dr. Gary and we're like, we can't process this. We need to let my body have some time to do this. But that is what all this rage is. And that was 8 months of clearing that trauma because it was so locked. And the interesting is the very next day, I woke up with bruises all over my arm and water on my elbow. I woke up with my neck swollen. Like I had all the visualizations. I won't go into more because I don't want to trigger anybody, but I had all the visualizations of what happened to me. It all just came out of my cellular memory. It was all stored in my body all those years.
And that was 1 year into the process of
That
desensitization?
was basically 2 years. So I had done a year and was doing really well, and then I was doing another year of just doing it still in bed, but like feeling really good in between and
Gotcha.
skipping some weeks and not feeling
Yeah.
like I have to do it every single week.
Yeah.
And then that happened, and from then on, I was nonstop up to 5 years of doing desensitization. The next couple years were in bed every 4 days because it really unlocked everything in my
Everything.
body,
Yeah.
and it was the hardest part of my process for sure.
Do
Yeah.
you think, and I definitely want to go into what this process is and what it was
Yeah.
like, and how it helped you heal. Do you think that because your body had released some that first year, it was
Mhm.
almost like it was open and unlocked and you were ready enough to go down into that 6-year-old?
Yes, definitely. I can look back after it happened and realized I wasn't ready to when Doctor Gary tried to tell me that, I wasn't strong enough to handle what I went through. My body needed that extra year to get stronger, to release some more trauma, to just be even my immune system just to be
Yes.
strong enough to handle what was released because it was definitely the biggest, hardest part of my whole entire journey.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of
Yeah.
hard times, but that was one of them,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you and understandably so. I think as coaches and people that work with people, and this is our normal tendency is like, I want to heal it all now. I want to figure it all out now. And my husband always says it's like trying to eat feed a steak to a baby. Like you can't, the
Yes.
baby can't eat the full steak. It's got to go one bite at a time because our systems couldn't actually like physically handle what it's not ready for. And I think that's
Yeah.
such a perfect example of it couldn't have handled that any
No.
sooner.
It couldn't, and everything, like, I look back now and know everything unfolded in perfect divine timing.
Yeah.
From the
Yeah.
time I started to heal, I woke up every day and said, "Lord, just show me the truth of who I am. Just
Mm.
show me more and more of the truth of who I am." And it unfolded, and it still is. There's still a
Joy.
piece that I'm about to do today, and
Wow.
I'm excited about it, and I'll share this later, but it's an integration piece to teach my body that I no longer have to respond to emotions physically,
Wow.
because my body still somatically processes my emotions.
Yeah.
And now I'm creating a remedy, and it's time to tell my body we're done with that story.
Wow. W
So,
and it and so I would love for you to talk about desensitization, what that was like for you, what that process is like before we do that, because I don't wanna forget this question.
yeah.
Do you feel like you're especially sensitive is your body's especially sensitive to your emotions? Do you think that all of us have that capacity to somatically experience? I know I do. Like I'm constantly, the more in tune I get with my body, the more I'm in harmony and peace when I
Yeah.
listen, because I've learned that my body is so, I work on a very somatic level. Do you think everybody does, or do you think some people are just more sensitive to that?
That's a great question, and, if you had asked me this question 1 week ago, I would have given you a completely different answer.
Wow.
But I have learned, because I sat down again on Sunday with my practitioner, with Doctor Gary, with 2 healers, and with the knowledge that I have in my own program, and said, "I'm missing a piece. I'm missing
Wow.
something, and there's something that I'm still too reactive. I've healed the past. I'm no longer triggered, but current stressors are still
Mm.
showing, manifesting physically for me. And it doesn't have to be that way anymore."
Yeah.
And so a week ago, I would have said, yes, we all have the propensity for that, that it's a sensitivity thing. Now I realize, and I've learned, and I'm 100% confident in this, that it was my body. It was at age 6, my body triggered something in my brain that said, we are not going to feel your emotions.
Mm.
We cannot, you cannot handle this. We're going to somatically express the emotions. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
So now the integration piece comes in, where I'm going to integrate the new message to my body that I don't have to do it that way anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is profound because I I think, just in my own personal experience, but working with people over the years, that we tend to all sort of suppress emotion and not
Yeah.
really learn how to process it. I mean, it's not something that we're taught. It's not something that's mainstream. It's not something that's talked about. And I'm sure we'll dive deeper into this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think many of our brains say, nope, you don't need to do that. And so we're gonna, like you said, that was profound. That was really profound what you just said. Really, really profound. So I'd love for you to dive in what desensitization is, what that process is like, what it feels like, and how you believe it really helped you get through all of that trauma.
Yeah. So that it's a lot to uncode, but basically desensitization is every trauma that happens, every stressor that happens creates an electromagnetic charge in our body of some sort, right? And so our cells take it on a cellular level. And so all of a sudden one thing, and it doesn't even have to be a big trauma. It could be you fought a lot with your mom and something in those arguments created these electromagnetic charges that changed your cells to where your methylation pathways, and I don't want to get too much into detail in the cellular biological piece, but our methylation pathways are what changes the way our body processes hormones, the way it processes, handles inflammation. So all the things that go on within our body can be changed through these stressors, through these electromagnetic charges that happen during these stressors, right? So everybody's different in how their body shows it responds to these stressors. And that's why there isn't a one quick fix for everybody. We're all so different. One of my clients, everything is her thyroid. She's had thyroid issues her whole life. Well, that's all her stressors manifest through her thyroid. For me, it was all chronic allergic reaction, my mast cells. For others, it's depression or anxiety. Others say, my brain says, we're going to keep you safe. I just want you to drink, right? Let's just cover it up. Let's not face it. Let's cover it up. But these are cellular messages from our body. And so when we are looking at healing all of our chronic stress and everything that's happened to us, we focus really well in this world right now on focusing on the mental and the emotional. Like we're getting that down, right? We're understanding we've got to feel our emotions. We've got to express them. They just want to be heard, right? They want to be expressed and loved on. And we're getting so much better at that conversation. But the missing piece seems to be the cellular piece, the biological piece, because it does trigger biological changes in our body. And the beauty in that is our body, just as easily as it goes out or goes, I should say, into dysregulation, it can go back into homeostasis. And so what desensitization does is it goes back to my process. We go back into everybody's timeline. So we start oftentimes in utero, because so many of us, our moms are stressed out and have all this anxiety, and that comes into the baby and comes into us, and we carry that into our cells, and we recode the way the cell and the cellular level, the body is responding to that. So it releases trapped emotions, recodes the body's response to the stressor, and then tells a new story around the trauma. And so I didn't do it this way, which is why it took 5 years to do. I didn't go through a timeline experience. I have been guided to bring this timeline experience into the world. And so that's the way I do it, which is much faster. It's still not fast. You are absolutely right in that it takes time because our bodies can only handle so much at a time.
Yeah.
But desensitization is literally recoding your body one step at a time for everything that's happened that's not serving your highest good, helping
Wow.
you to come back to your divine design, the way that we're meant to be. Before, it's so funny because people say woo woo isn't good. Well, I say woo woo, WHU is what really gets us, not WOO, but WHU, which is worldly hangups, because it's our worldly hangups that
Mm.
cause so much dysregulation and cause us to have beliefs that aren't serving our highest good and cause us to hold back from being the person we're supposed to be in this world, and so on and so forth. So desensitization just kind of reverses all that and helps bring us back to our divine design.
The thing that I love about what you just said was it sounds like it's literally working on the mental level, right? Because
Mhm.
the thoughts and the beliefs that were created from those instances, the
Yes.
emotional level and the biological level. And you're talking about your divine plans. You're bringing the spiritual in there as well. And
Yes.
as we were talking about before we started this, that is my obsession, is bridging science and spirituality, because I
Yeah.
think you can't see the whole picture with just
No.
one part of the equation. You can't get the whole answer from just one part of the equation. But, so many people think that they're opposing. And I'm always like, that's so silly to me, because
I know.
one just explains something and the other explains something else, but it's both of those things together. So that process that you're talking about is just mind blowing for me, because it blends so many things. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you took that process and you sort of evolved it to help quicken the process. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Well, help quicken it and just do it in a different way to where it's more complete. Like I, I had to do so let me back up just a moment. After I did desensitization for 5 years, my body learned to desensitize on its own. So when
Yeah.
something came up, but my body just released on its own. And all the last year of it, my body was releasing and healing the behaviors that I created because of all the things that happened to me. So the lack of, faith in myself and what I can bring into the world. And, all along, spirit's guiding me and telling me, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. We're going to, take this process and we're going to bring it out in the world. And I've been building the underlying answers for years through slowly because I'm listening to spirit and I'm learning. And I had 5 different practitioners during those years just because of COVID, and one retired and then came out of retirement. There's just different things that happen. And I just learned they all did it a little different. So I took what I feel is like the best of each and put it into EBDT. And that's why people can do it a little bit faster. And that's the whole timeline experience, is really healing every aspect of each stressor at a time. So I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I got off a little bit there, but
No, you did. That was
okay.
that was so what does a session look like? And what does, when you say my body got used to releasing, what does that look like?
That is such a great question. And that really brings back to this whole somatic thing. So for me, I was in bed for 4 days because everything expressed somatically. But for my clients, like usually they'll feel it for a day or two because it's the release, right? So you're allowing that trauma to come out of your body. You're allowing those messages to come out of your body. So if let's say we're healing something that was really hard for them, they could feel more depressed for a day or two, or more sad, or just like, one client's like, I was so angry all day yesterday, or I just cried all day. And so there is a release for most clients. A couple of them say, I feel nothing, and they're still healing. So I know it's working. That surprised me at first. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, some people just don't feel it at all, but most people feel something in the release for a day or two. And just the way that it works is I create these homeopathic remedies. So I actually create what's called a primary remedy. So let's say we're dealing with a trauma, from age 7, and I write down everything the client tells me about that trauma. And then I go through my homeopathic remedies and I say, okay, I connect with spirit, I connect with their body and their energy and say, okay, based on this event, what methylation pathways are out of balance? What hormonal imbalances are there? What brain SAR codes need to be in this remedy? And I have all these homeopathic remedies, and I go through each box and I muscle test and say, and pull in the things that are in dysregulation because of that life event. And then I
Wow.
create a homeopathic remedy, I mail it to them, and then they
Wow.
either wear it for like 32 hours, or somebody can use it in their electromagnetic field with a laser. So we're getting a
Wow.
little high tech. It's hard to kind of understand how all that works, but it basically puts the homeopathic remedy into their body and
Mm.
saying, we're releasing this now, we're letting it go. And it comes with, healing practices for the week, and messages to talk to your body as you're releasing, and, visualizations and all kinds of things to help your body just release that in more peace and ease. But it is 100% effective. So once somebody clears it, that
Yeah.
issue is no longer an issue. You can see things, like I can see my traumas, I can talk about them, but
Wow.
I'm not triggered by them anymore. There's no charge in my body around what happened to me
Wow.
anymore.
Wow. So after the 4 years of doing this, what did, like, life get normal
Oh
for
my
you? Like,
gosh. Yes. It's like I said, I'm still the one piece that we finally just figured out on Sunday. And I'm so grateful and super excited. And I'll do a follow-up call with you if you ever want it
yes.
because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um to show, but because my body still, like I said, reacts kind of physically to emotions. And so that's the only piece that's left. But I'm no longer triggered, so I'm not allergic to anything.
Wow.
So for instance, dairy, this is a great example of how this desensitization works. Dairy was like the last thing I desensitized to. I was scared to do it because I had a massive anaphylactic reaction where my airways shut down every time I would get even just a drop of dairy. And I had done all the desensitization. I'd healed everything. I was eating everything I could eat and going out in the world and no longer reacting to perfumes. And I can hug people and all the things I could never do, I can do now.
Wow.
But I was still cautious about, I mean, not hadn't done dairy and I was tired too of doing the going through the healings. I'm like, I don't really want to do that one. Well, then my brother came to visit and we went to breakfast and they promised me there was no dairy and there was dairy in the hash browns. Turned out there was butter and I had a massive anaphylactic reaction and I came home and told my husband, I am no longer allowing this story in my life.
Mm.
And I created once I calmed down and everything, I created a remedy and I gave it to myself that night and it goes through the 4 days and it was literally for me, it was like 4 days of feeling like my airways are shutting down. It was really hard, but it was because again, it showed for me, it showed up all 4 days as if I was actually having that reaction all these years. So then I could eat it and I do dairy and I'm like, wow, this tastes good.
Wow.
And so that's a good example of how our brain, so I wasn't allergic to the dairy, and this is what's so important for people to understand. Our body associates the things around us during traumas and they become a threat. So everything that was in my surroundings, everything that was in my digestive system, so the trees in Georgia, because I was in the forest, the dirt, the dust, the humidity, for years and years and years, I knew when it was going to rain because I would have massive asthma attacks 2 days before any rain. Once I desensitized to humidity and rain and did that trauma, I no longer, I don't know it's raining unless I'm, told. So our bodies just associate these things as threats, but it's not a real threat. It just doesn't know how to take what's happening. And so it says, well, it must be this. And then our brains start saying, so I started saying more and more, well, I'm allergic to this, I'm allergic to this, I'm allergic to this. And so then I started manifesting even more of my own allergies with my own belief system.
Yeah.
So it becomes this cycle, this circle, this wheel that you're just constantly on, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I think it's so important for people to hear, especially anyone that's listening right now that may be struggling with, because like you said, I want to highlight what you said about this manifests in different way for people. So maybe like an autoimmune, or it may
yes,
not be allergic reactions, it may be something else. And
yeah,
they've been trying to do all the things, all the meditation or whatever it may be that they're
yes,
trying to look for, and maybe they're only stuck on this route. So I would love for you to talk to that person that's like, well, I've been trying only this, and
yes.
talk about really the importance of sort of taking pieces from all of the modalities.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that, science doesn't really bring in spirituality. And even beyond that, like we we grow up with beliefs. We're taught beliefs, right? And we hold ourselves back from allowing some modalities that could really help us heal because of those beliefs that are our fear holding us back. They're not necessarily truth, right? I've never been one that said no Western medicine, but I will say by the time I started healing, I was pretty burnt out. I'm like,
Mm.
I'm not taking any more steroids. I'm not like, there's got to be other answers, right? And then well, here's a good example. This is kind of a weird thing, but I was helping a woman pass away. So I was called to work with her. It's a very long story, but I ended up being there with her. And she lived on the harbor and I got her 24-hour care and she was firing every caregiver and she was just a menace. She was so mean, but she loved me. And I loved her. And I don't know why, because she was a horrible human. She really was. She was so mean to everybody. She had lists and lists and lists of all the people, all the neighbors she's called on over the years, and the police on, and like, she just was not a kind human being. But she and I met one day and connected, and I was meant to be in her life. And I told my husband, I think I'm meant to teach her unconditional love.
Mm.
So fast forward, I'm at her house every day. I'm going through my own healing process, so I couldn't be at her house very long, but I would check in on her and she would just smile. But in the meantime, she's being horrible to her caregivers. And one day she called me and she had fired another caregiver, and I had to come over. And anytime this happened, I would just slip some drugs into her yogurt and give her that and then calm her down. And that day she said to me, I wish you would adopt me. And I said, well, what would that look like? And I said, and she goes, thought about it for a second, and she goes, unconditional love. And I said, how is that any different than what I'm already giving you? So I had already known that that was what I was there to teach her, right? So I gave her some drugs, and then hospice the next day said, we can no longer allow her to do this to your caregivers. Nobody wants to come back. We need to drug her. So we have to take her out of the house. So we need to drug her. And so I agreed to drug her, and she died a week later. And she was just out of it that whole week, like not talking or anything. And that triggered all the times I've been drugged, all the times I
Mm.
went to the doctor all those years and was just like, here, just take this. Let's get rid of the symptoms. Take this. Let's get rid of the symptoms. Now, for her, we needed that, right? Because I didn't want her to have to leave her house because they were going to put her in a home. But for me, like, it brought up that fear of Western medicine. But I can also look back and see how much they helped me and how much good they provided for me and the good things they did for me, right?
Yeah.
And so when we block ourselves, I have clients that absolutely refuse to see a Western practitioner.
Mm.
And I also have clients that absolutely, they want to talk about spirituality, but they absolutely refuse to talk about scripture or God
Mm.
or,
Mm.
all of that can block ourselves from healing at the divine level that we're meant to heal. And all of that is true for them in the moment. It comes from life experiences. It comes from our upbringing and what we're taught and what we believe and the life experiences we have. It's true in that moment, but is it God's truth? No.
Mm.
So
Mm.
when we allow ourselves to heal and do this kind of healing, we start unfolding where those beliefs that we have come from, and are they really serving our highest good? Are they of God?
Wow.
Because you kind of said this earlier, but I look at it like I'm helping to unite Western science, Eastern practices, which is like holistic, right? And then spirituality and scripture. And all four of those are giving the same messages in different
Mhm.
language,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
truth in all of them. Are there people taking advantage of them and doing bad things with all of them too? Yeah, there are, in every way, not just one of them.
Yeah.
That's just human nature.
Absolutely.
But the
Absolutely.
truth is, if we allow ourselves to let go of that fear, to let go of that anger, we start opening up to these four aspects. And that's when divine healing really
Yeah.
starts to unfold a lot easier and faster for us.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody that is very analytical and maybe has no connection with their emotional body or even just their physical body? So they
Yeah.
sort of live up in the
In
head
the head.
and how do they even begin to start tuning in? Because I ask that because there's so many people that I've worked with and they'll be like, I didn't even realize, and you shared this kind of, it's like they get so used to living at a low level anxiety, like living in fight
Hmm.
or flight without even realizing it. Like they think that that's just who they are and until
Yeah.
they have a moment of relief. And then they're like, "Oh my gosh." So
Yeah.
how do you even begin to get somebody to get more connected to the language of their body?
That's such a beautiful question, and it's not an easy answer, and everyone's
Mm.
so different.
Mm.
When I look at my clients, I have one that's been with me for a year, and she's going through the process. She has massive trauma, massive, massive trauma, starting at age 2 when she was run over by her mom. So everything, she was in a tricycle, and ended up in a body cast for months, and so everything is manifested in her muscles. So everything is manifested physically, leading to a diagnosis of um not cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy. And but that she can reverse that story, and it has taken her almost a year to get out of her head and into her heart and start to understand what I've been teaching. So I guess what I would say is try it. Just try it. Because when we aren't willing to try things, we hold ourselves back from what might be possible for us.
Totally.
Everybody's journey is different on this earth, and how long it's going to take each person to get it, to understand it, to accept it is going to be unique. We can't force that. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I don't have an answer that says they need to do this, but I will
Yeah.
say when we start to learn to get out of our head and in our heart, magic starts to happen in our life. I had no idea how to feel emotions. I had no idea. I
Totally.
I remember the day that I went to my brother's, and like I said, I used to have to stay in his motorhome, and we'd gone up there to see my son who's up in Northern California, away at college. And so it was my son and my brother and his wife and my husband and a couple other friends. And normally when we're at my brother's, he has this big outdoor patio, and he built a big outdoor kitchen so that he could partly so that I could be out, we could all be outdoors when I'm there. And that weekend, it was pouring rain. It was the baseball playoffs and the Raider game. So everybody was inside the whole weekend. And I could not go inside. And I sat in the motorhome, and they would come and check on me. I'm like, oh, I'm reading a book. I'm good. Enjoy yourself. And I literally had myself convinced that I was just enjoying a nice weekend while my entire family is inside having fun. And so I come back and I'm sitting down telling my healer this, that my coach at the time, and she's like, Cindy, stop, pause. You're scratching yourself to pieces right now. You're not feeling it. I said, feeling what? And she goes, you're talking like this is normal. Like this is okay that you're locked in a motorhome while your family's all having fun. She's like, you're so disconnected, aren't you? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I'm fine. So she lays me on a table and she does this calming, this breath work exercise. And she goes, I want you to get in touch with your sadness. I'm like, okay, whatever. What sadness? I don't have sadness. I'm not sad. As I'm doing this, right? As I'm scratching and I'm talking about it and I'm doing this. And she calms me down, and I start talking to my sadness, and I just start bawling,
Mm,
and I see my sadness.
mm,
And she says, "What? Ask your sadness what it wants you to know." And I just said, "What do you want me to know?" And it said,
mm,
"Feel me,
mm,
know me. I'm a part of you. It's okay." And that was literally the first time in years and years and years, over 3 decades, that I had felt a feeling about myself. I could feel other
mm,
people's pain, sadness, like that was never an issue, but my own, I shoved in so deep. So when we talk about speaking to those people, I guess what I can say is you're not helping yourself by blocking it. And so if you have weird things that are happening, symptoms, autoimmune diseases, if you have things that are showing up in your life that are not fun, that are not healthy, that are not good, maybe there's a connection. Maybe you can start just looking at, oh, is there a connection between what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling? Because the moment we start listening to our body and we start connecting with those emotions and those feelings, the more we start listening, the more we get to start healing.
mm. I love that so much. I have two questions. And
Yeah.
again, I don't want to, I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for hours on end, so you'll have to come back.
Yeah.
Would you say that do you believe that every single chronic condition that people have is directly related to some emotion or trauma they haven't allowed themselves to feel? And number two, I actually listened to one of your videos about this, and it's what you're talking about. And it took me years of my own spiritual journey to understand this aspect. And I always say my daughter has actually taught me how to feel emotions, because she's been
Mm.
an emotional like master since the moment she came out. I mean, she
Ooh,
feels
chills.
emotions, like she feels them, and I never knew how to handle it because I never knew how to handle my own. And I always say
Right.
she taught me the first couple years of my spiritual journey was like complete spiritual bypass, where it was like, I'm just going to go up in the ethers and unicorns and rainbows.
Be
And I
happy.
always be happy. And I always say, like, the second era was like my descent down into my humanness and my body and my emotions. And so I would love for you to talk about, in the video you shared, you said we can use gratitude as a way to almost bypass ourselves. So if you
Yes.
could dive into a little bit deeper about, you just spoke on it, of like thinking, oh, I'm fine, I'm happy, I'm okay for 30 plus years. And then finally being able to, like, oh, no, I'm not okay.
Can you remind me what the very first part of your question was?
Yeah, sorry, I
Okay.
went on to
No,
that for a
that's
minute.
okay.
Do you honestly believe, can you honestly
Oh,
say
yeah.
to the people out there that are listening that yes, every chronic condition can be tied back to some
Okay.
trauma or emotional state?
I'm so glad I'm glad I asked you to repeat that because that's such an important question. And the answer is absolutely not. It is not true. There are definitely physical triggers, physical things that happen to us, right? We can get in a car accident and it can trigger all kinds of problems. We can sit in a house full of mold and suddenly we have problems. We can get a vaccination that is perfectly fine for one person and sends another person into a whole loophole. We can, there's Lyme's disease, right? There's so many different physical things that can happen to us. And in desensitization, in my process, we clear those first because they will constantly trigger everything else. All those do is make everything else amplified. So when we are, let's say, Lyme's disease, right? Everything that's been going on inside your body that's been kind of boiling under the surface and not really showing up yet just manifests, 10 times. But the original trigger isn't the trauma, which is what we normally would want to treat first. The original trigger is the Lyme's disease, and we have to treat that first. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to be, to have the Lyme's disease really impact everything else, including even the releases. So I do a process with my clients where we handle the physical stuff first, and then we move into all the trauma. So that's a really important question. I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
And then as far as spiritually bypassing with gratitude, this is something that I still struggle with a little bit with my incredible mama, because as I said, life was beautiful. We had a great life. And we were also told, life is great. Like, get over it, be happy. And my mom has this unbelievable, even to this day, way of turning everything into positivity. And I see it now. And if she listens to this, she'll kill me. But I see it now as her survival method. My survival method was that too, right? I'm good. I'm fine. I just have allergies. I have other people. I had some friends that had some in my life that were like, one of my dearest friends lived in a wheelchair all by herself, so had cerebral palsy. We helped her get into a home. Like, I always compared myself, well, Allison has it so much worse than I do. So all of that only stopped me from addressing my issues, right? It didn't allow me to get real with myself and what was going on. Now, is gratitude important? Absolutely. Is being positive important? Absolutely. But listening to your body and feeling those emotions is just as important. I'll give you a quick example. This morning, I took a walk with my dog. She hasn't been able to walk for about a month because she had a surgery. And so it was stressful because she's a 10-month-old puppy and it's like, training her all over again. I feel like everything I trained is just out the door. And so we were retraining. And then there were two big things that happened on the walk. There was a gentleman that we thought maybe was passed away in the park. And this guy and I were trying to figure out, do we call the police? And it turned out he was just asleep. He was a homeless man. And then there was a dog that got loose that came after my dog. So these two stressors, in addition to walking my dog and realizing, oh my gosh, we've gone some backwards. And now that walk was a little stressful because she's a big dog and she, was overpowering me a little bit. So I come back, and because I'm still, again, not releasing, but feeling my emotions somatically, I was overheated. I was itching like crazy. I sat in there because I had this podcast interview in a couple hours, and I sat in my room where I normally meditate, and I was like trying to positive my way into this. I'm good. I'm fine. The dog didn't hurt, right? I'm analyzing it and saying, we're okay. The guy was alive. The dog didn't attack my dog. Raya, I can work with her. And then I went, Cindy, You're itching like crazy. You know this. I paused. I listened to my body and I said, oh, you need to let these emotions out. And I cried. And literally, it was like a 2-minute cry. And I was mad. So I had two emotions. I had sadness because of the gentleman in the park, and because my dog's taking some backward steps and I'd worked so hard to get her there. And then I had anger over the person that let their dog off the leash that almost attacked my dog. So those were two emotions that needed to come out of my body. So I cried, and then with anger, I punch. And as I'm doing it, I'm seeing what's going on and I'm speaking verbally. So I'm letting it out of my body. And then all the itching went away. My whole body calmed down. The overheatedness stopped. It all just stopped completely. So this goes back to your question of, I could have sat there and tried and tried and tried to positive my way into this, and I would be itching like crazy and I'd be a wreck on this call right now. But I did what I call a purposeful pause, which is I paused long enough to ask my body, what are you really trying to tell me? What do you want me to know? Now I'm
Mm.
excited for this evening when I give myself the remedy and I don't feel it that way anymore physically, but I am still so grateful for my body's messages and will always listen for what it wants me to release.
Wow. I think it's so, maybe not to you because of everything you've been through, but really magical for every single person that hears your story, because
Mm,
yours was so, it was so in your face, like
yes.
with the allergies. Like it wasn't, for some people it doesn't manifest that extreme, so they keep shoving it and they keep shoving it and they
Yes.
keep shoving it. And for you, like even that example is like, I can't lie to myself because I'm itching,
Yes.
So it's like, it's such, and we all gain the benefit of you working through that process, yourself working through that process,
Yeah.
so that we all can go, oh my gosh, yeah, like the next time. And like I said, I'm so excited about what you're sharing here, because that has been the second aspect of my own journey, is like, because I would do it with my daughter in the early stages of my personal development. Like, you don't need to be a victim and you don't need to be angry. And
Yeah.
like all these things that I thought were helping her, until I started listening to her and
Mm,
listening to the things that she wasn't saying. And it was like, she just wanted me to hold the space for her to be an emotional mess and
yes.
to let it pass,
To
because
let
it
it
would
pass.
pass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we acknowledge our emotions, they do pass. They just want to be acknowledged. And sometimes it takes a bit to figure out what is it my body
Yeah.
is actually trying to say. And then that's when I call
Yeah.
in like my angels and my guides and God. And,
Yeah.
I'm like, I need a little
I love
support
that.
here. Something's going on and I need you to help me figure it out. And honestly, it happens so fast when I do that.
Yeah.
So, uh, you know, I see myself, and I appreciate you saying that so much. And I have said for a long time now that I feel like God put me in this role in life and gave me this experience because what is happening on the outside of me is what's happening on the inside of
Uh,
everybody. I am
uh,
the outward expression of what everybody's body goes through, just not so loudly on the outside. And so if you can learn from me, because you don't want your body to have to scream as loud as that. You don't want it to get to the
yeah.
point that it's screaming so loud physically, right?
Yeah.
You want to
Absolutely.
learn to get in touch with your emotions and love on yourself and see your like emotional intelligence, your emotional body as important as every other part of you.
Yeah.
And when you can do that before it gets to this place where you know, suddenly cancer or you know what I mean, like have
Yeah.
some big
Yeah.
disease, you're
Yeah.
giving yourself a gift. Unfortunately, as humans, and this was true for me too, so I'm just as bad, we tend to wait until things are really, really bad before we do something. I don't have an
Absolutely.
answer for that for people other than to say, ask yourself, am I doing that? Am I just pushing this aside until it's going to get so bad that I can no longer push it aside? Because if
Yeah.
you give yourself a gift of doing it beforehand,
Yeah.
your life it'll be so life-changing for you.
And I think it's important too, about what you shared with the one woman you worked with, that it took her a year just to even
Yeah.
get to the place. It's so much unwinding. And I think nowadays it's so easy to want a quick fix. It's so, I mean, everything
Mhm.
in the world affirms fast, quick, like get
Instant.
that dopamine instant all of the time. And I always say, like, the next evolution will be the people who learn how to have, what do they call that? Something not instant gratification, but delayed gratification. It's
Oh,
like the
yes.
ones that learn that, like, it's not going to be, if you want to go deep, like you said, if you want to get to the root, it took a long time to get here. It's gonna take some time to,
Yeah.
but that it's worth it, because look at you,
Yeah.
35 years of living one way, and then all of a sudden, like, I get to go outside, I get to hug people. Like,
Yes.
I would think that all that was worth it for the life that you live now.
So worth it. I mean, in the beginning, I'm not so much anymore. Now I'm just in awe and just in appreciation. But for so many things in the beginning, when I first healed everything, I would just be like, oh my gosh, that person walked by me and had perfume, or they mowed the lawn and I didn't have this like I didn't even know what it was like to not be in fight and
Wow.
flight. But then I'd take a walk and I'm like, "Oh, I'm just smelling the grass and it's not putting me into a massive allergic reaction," or I'm just, you know, just everything. And it's taken my family and friends time to even realize, "Wow, she really is healed. We don't have to be
Yeah.
afraid anymore," you know?
I'm sure that took some getting used to for them
Yeah.
too, to like unwire that in their system of like, oh, we don't
Yes.
need to take care of her like that anymore.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
So what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding when it comes to healing? So people
Mm,
who are maybe already down like the Eastern medicine path, or, they're trying the different things to heal, but they're still running into roadblocks and they still find themselves frustrated and stuck.
mm.
What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding, and where would you guide them?
That's a beautiful question, and I right away would say that the biggest misunderstanding is that we believe that the answers are outside of us,
Mm.
and the answers are within us. And so, for years, one of the things I even had to heal or got to heal was my mom became a naturopath through this process of trying to find answers for me. But then it was like, try this herb and it's going to fix everything, and lay on this mat. It's going to fix everything.
Yeah.
And so Western, Eastern both do that, right? They have the one answer for everyone, and there is no one answer for everyone
Mm.
because we're all so different, and the way our body processes the trauma and the stress is so different. And but the best answer is within us. Now, sometimes that takes help, right? I hired a psychic to figure out what was my body trying to tell me. Oh, I'm going through this 6-year-old release, right? Sunday, when I sat down with 2 healers and my doctor and said, "This is still not normal. I've healed everything. Why am I still doing this?" And between us and a conversation between us, we were able to say, "You are still processing everything somatically. It's time to integrate, to tell your body, we're safe, we're healed.
Wow.
We don't have to show our emotions this way anymore. We don't have to express our emotions this way anymore." And
Right.
so I learned what I need to do, and now I get to do that. And so sometimes, yes, we need help from outside, but our body gives us those answers. And the second part of that, I would say that's so key is to really look at your symptoms as your friend. We see a
Yes.
symptom and it's, oh my gosh, I need to stop this. I need to take something. I need to do something about it. It's not our enemy. Your body's not betraying you. Your body's expressing to you. Your body's sharing with you what needs to be healed. So looking at your symptoms as a magical, beautiful, like message is a huge step towards healing in the right direction.
Wow. That's beautiful. And I resonate with that so much. And I know our audience will as well. Cause I think so many, even in some spiritual spaces, it's almost like forget the body, don't pay attention to the body. It's
Yeah.
almost like, like avoiding the body instead of, like you said, integrating it and approaching it from a very holistic perspective. And
Yeah.
that's really what I love that you bring to the table.
Thank you. Yeah. And healers are amazing and they're so
Yeah,
necessary. When I look at
absolutely.
the conversation we had with these 2 healers and with Dr. Gary, Dr. Gary brought in the biological part. But one of the healers said, "I see something from your brain and it's at age 6." So she was able to see that age 6 is
Yes.
when my brain flipped a switch to start processing somatically, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So healers, God sends them. I look at them as like messengers of God, right?
Yeah.
Healers are there to guide us and give us,
Yeah.
and she'll do a healing on me. And I know that it's temporary because as soon as I get triggered again, right? This is in the way it used to be. It would give me some relief, but then as soon as I got triggered again, those energy blocks would come back up. But I
Yep.
needed those breaks sometimes. And so
Yeah.
those healings were so important. But when we don't heal it on the cellular level, we're missing
Yeah.
an important piece because otherwise we're constantly bringing back the blocks, right? All that
Yeah.
energy that we're
Yeah.
clearing, whether it's
Yeah.
through a healer or through a meditation practice or through
Yeah.
drumming or whatever ways that you're
Yeah.
clearing and
Yeah.
freeing yourself of that
Yeah.
energy,
Yeah.
it's going to keep coming back and blocking up because you're not
Yeah.
dealing with the root cause of it, the
Yeah.
trigger behind it. So
Yeah.
it was beautiful to see all of us come together and say, there's an answer here. And when, as
Yes.
soon as she said 6 years old, and then the other healer said, she actually said, I don't need to do a remedy. I'm going to just, this is a little evolved, but she actually said, I don't need to do a remedy because I just need to know it and believe it so strongly that
Yeah.
my body will change it. But I'm not there yet. And I know that about myself. So I believe
Yeah.
so much in the remedies. I'm going to create the remedy because that's going
It's
to tell my
amazing.
brain. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that because, you know, our thoughts create our reality. Our thoughts are
Yes.
going to inform our reality. But you just said something so important. I know I'm not there yet at that stage. So I'm
Yeah.
still going to work on this level because that's what's going to support me best.
Yes. And
Super important.
desensitization, the way I look at it is all it's doing is helping your body do what it's naturally meant to do.
Mm,
So it's like it's not the treatment that's healing you. It's the
yeah.
desensitization that's allowing the body to heal itself. So it's just like
Yes.
supporting the body in doing what it naturally knows how to do. We just
Yeah.
need to know how to get to that point to naturally know how to do
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know of Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yes. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know
Awesome.
him personally, but I know of
No,
him.
no. The
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
His
Yeah.
book, so when I was laying in bed for that 8 months and
Yeah.
my 2 people that I infiltrate, I put positive affirmations all over my house, all over my room. I put on Dr. Joe Dispenza. I read his book, You Are the Placebo. That's where I
Yep.
was
Me
like,
too.
"Oh,
Yep.
this is me."
Me
And
too.
then I also Dr. Michael Beckwith from
Hmm.
Agape is
Yep.
a huge teacher of mine. So I listen to him every day, and I just like that's when I started to really just go down this whole different belief
I love
system
it.
about my healing
Love
possibilities.
it. Love it. You're doing amazing things, Cindy, amazing
Thank
things in the
you.
world. So like I said, I could talk to you forever. We're going to have you come back, especially after this thing that you're doing. But
Yeah.
to sort of bring it to a close, I always ask everybody 3 questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, the best piece of advice I've ever received. Oh gosh, there's so many, but I would say it was when Dr. Palanasamy said, "Why do you need to know the answer? Why don't we just heal it?" So it wasn't necessarily a piece of advice, but it clicked in my brain that we get caught up. He goes, if you find out what you have, that is all your brain is going to tell you. A label just tells you that you have something. Let's just heal the reason that your body's showing up that way right now. So,
So simple. So
yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Second question is, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Mm. Well, what pops into my head is for many things, many times over my life, is this one thing is going to fix you.
Mm, mm,
Right.
mm,
It's going back to that quick fix. Of course I wanted that quick fix. I mean, I tried
yeah.
so many things over my life because I'm like, I'll
Yeah.
take this herb. I'll try this, right?
Whatever.
And so,
Yeah.
really the worst piece of advice was this. I
Is the
have
answer.
the answer
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
everybody's problems. If everybody
Yes.
just ate this or drank this or did this,
Yes.
all their
Yes.
problems will be solved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So the last one, if you could go back to the midst of one of your messiest, darkest moments, what would you say to that version of yourself?
Mm, wow. I've done so much healing work on this. I've talked to her so many times at these different
Mm,
points in my life, but I think I'm taken back right now to like the 6-year-old trauma and just say, I hear you.
mm,
I know I'm sorry.
mm,
That's it. She was so
mm,
alone. I was so alone. I didn't tell
mm,
anybody. And he
mm,
whispered something in my ear and he
mm,
harmed my that's what the whole right arm was. Um, he harmed me because that's what made me not
mm,
tell anybody. Whatever he said, I never heard the words, which I'm fine with that. But I
mm.
actually had to heal my ear because the
Wow.
energy of whatever he put in my
Yeah.
ear was
Yeah.
impacting my hearing, and that's all fixed and healed. And I would say to that person, "I'm so sorry. I love you. I hear you. I know. Just I know. I know." Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Because I know somebody else out there right now, just you saying that is going to help them
Mm,
for sure. Yeah. Cindy, thank you so, so, so much for coming on, for sharing your story, for being real, for being authentic. I mean, like I
mm,
said, the whole reason I started this podcast was because so many people are on the journey. And like you said, most of the time it gets worse before it gets better.
yeah.
And a lot of times people believe in when it's worse, it's not working or they're doing something wrong. And my message is, no, you're actually doing something right. You know,
Yeah.
you're letting go of it. And I think your process is a perfect example of that. That is almost gets worse before it gets better because that is the process of letting go of all of this. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing, for what you're doing in the world, for what you're creating. It's just, it's amazing. So thank you
Thank
for being here,
you.
and I want to have you come back for sure.
Okay, I will. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for having me. What you're
yeah,
doing is so important. This podcast is talking about the messy truth is so important. We really are living in a numbed environment, a numbed world right now. And, to wake up, it's going to take these kind of conversations and relating to people and letting them see what's possible for them. So thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. We will see you next time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode. If this episode resonated in any way, I would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody who's in the thick of it too. If you want more behind the scenes or you want tools to support you along your journey of messiness, come hang out with me over on Instagram at mhollis_thesage. But most importantly, just remember the mess is part of the magic.